banquet hall of the Varan Palace glittered with crystals harvested from the molten mountains, each shard pulsing with bioluminescent light. Humans weren't supposed to be here, at least not in the sea of an alien king whose empire had only just signed a peace treaty with Earth. Yet Captain Elias Kale, battle-scarred veteran of the Orion Wars, stood in the middle of the hall, surrounded by stares that ranged from cautious curiosity to open disdain. And among the most disdainful were the three daughters of King Veriker. They were dazzling in their alien way, tall, lithe, their skin carrying a faint opalescent shimmer that shifted colors in the light. Their eyes, oval and luminous, seemed to hold galaxies within them. Clad in ceremonial silks, each carried herself with regal grace. But their beauty was eclipsed by the ridicule in their laughter. "Is that really a human?" sneered the eldest, Lithra, folding her forefinger hands as though she feared contamination. "I thought they were taller. This one looks like a child." The second sister, Saris, covered her lips and giggled. "They say humans are fragile, breakable things. If the air grows too thin, they suffocate. If the water is impure, they sicken. It's a wonder he survived the trip." The youngest, Vela, tilted her head with theatrical pity. "Perhaps he is here as a jester? That would make sense. What else could such a species offer?" Their voices carried across the hall. The nobles chuckled behind jeweled goblets, and even some of the guards smirked. Elias felt the heat rise in his chest. He'd endured insults before back on Earth, and during campaigns when alien soldiers had called humans soft meat. But hearing it from these royal daughters in the heart of their empire stung worse than any battlefield wound. Still, he held his tongue. He wasn't here to fight, but to represent humanity with dignity. King Veriker, broad-shouldered and draped in a mantle of scale fur, raised his hand for silence. His voice thundered like a storm. "My daughters." His eyes narrowed, glowing faintly gold. "You mock this man, yet he carries scars from wars that would have annihilated lesser races. You dismiss him, yet he has stood against fleets that outnumbered him 10-1. He is not a jester." The hall quieted. The sisters' smirks faltered. The king's next words fell like a hammer. "He will be your husband." A collective gasp rippled through the court. "What?" Lithra's eyes widened, the shimmer of her skin flashing red with outrage. "Father, you cannot be serious." Sarah stumbled a step back, as though the mere suggestion was offensive. "A human consort? That would shame our bloodline." Vela, the youngest, was speechless. Her lips parted, her luminous gaze darting between her father and the human who stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. But King Veriker's word was law. He rose from his throne and pointed at Elias. "This man has shown restraint in the face of insult. He has proven himself stronger in spirit than many warriors of my court. If peace between our peoples is to be sealed, it must be bound in blood and union. The three of you will share him. Together." The hall erupted. Some cheered, some shouted in protest, but none dared challenge the king openly. Elias' mind reeled. Marriage? To three alien princesses who despised him? He had come prepared to negotiate trade, to speak on military cooperation. Not this. The sisters turned on him with burning eyes. "You did this," Lithra hissed, voice sharp as a blade. "I didn't ask for this." Elias snapped back, his patience cracking. "Believe me, I'm not thrilled about being thrown to three spoiled brats who think mocking someone makes them powerful. That silenced them for a heartbeat." Then Saris narrowed her eyes. "You dare speak so to royalty?" "Yes," Elias said simply. "Because where I come from, respect is earned, not demanded." Hashtag the days after. The marriage was formalized swiftly, too swiftly for Elias to process. Ceremonial bonds of light wrapped around their hands as oaths were spoken. The sisters stood stiff beside him, their shimmering skin shifting with displeasure. The court buzzed with scandal for weeks. At first, the palace felt like a cage. The sisters avoided him, mocking him in whispers when they thought he couldn't hear. Lithra called him the pet. Saris dubbed him softshell. Vela said nothing, but her silence was its own judgment. Yet Elias wasn't one to crumble. If he was to be here, he would not wither in humiliation. He trained daily in the courtyard, pushing his body through human drills. He repaired palace equipment with his hands, showing skills few nobles bothered with. Slowly, servants who once looked down on him began nodding with respect. One evening, when the power conduits failed, Elias worked through the night to restore the palace's energy grid. The sisters found him beneath a tangle of sparking wires, face smudged with soot, sweat dripping down his brow. "You'll kill yourself with that primitive tinkering," Lithra scoffed. Elias didn't look up. "Better than sitting uselessly and complaining." Sarah sniffed. "You imply we are useless?" "I imply you've never lifted a hand for anyone but yourselves." For once, they had no retort. Hashtag the first crack. It was Vela, the youngest, who softened first. She lingered near the courtyard during his training, curiosity in her luminous eyes. When Elias collapsed after a particularly brutal session, she surprised him by offering water. "You endure much," she murmured, hesitant. "Even when mocked, you keep going." "Why?" "Because giving up isn't in me," Elias replied between breaths. "Mockery doesn't break me. Quitting would." Her gaze lingered, thoughtful. That night, she didn't join her sisters in their usual ridicule. Hashtag trial by fire. Peace was fragile. One night, assassins from a rival house infiltrated the palace. Elias woke to the hiss of blades cutting through air. Without hesitation, he grabbed a fallen guard's weapon and fought. The attackers underestimated him. Human reflexes, honed by years of war, carried him through. When the sister stumbled into the corridor, he was already standing over 3 unconscious assassins, chest heaving, blood streaked across his arm. Lithra froze. Sarah's lips parted in shock. Vela whispered, "You saved us." "I didn't do it for you," Elias growled. "I did it because it was right." But the seed was planted. Hashtag the change. From then on, their treatment shifted. Lithra began sparring with him, testing his strength. At first, she tried to humiliate him. But when he managed to throw her in a clean move, she laughed the first time, a sharp sound of genuine respect. Saris, fascinated by his stubborn pragmatism, asked him to teach her human survival skills. She mocked less, questioned more. And Vela, quiet and thoughtful, simply stayed near, her luminous eyes softening whenever he spoke. Slowly, hostility gave way to reluctant admiration. Admiration grew into respect. And respect, inch by inch, began to kindle something deeper. Hashtag the night of truth. One evening, beneath the palace's crystal-lit dome, the 3 sisters stood before Elias. No longer mocking, no longer sneering. Lithra spoke first, voice steady. "We were wrong about you. You are not fragile." Saris added, "You are not soft shell. You are steel beneath flesh." And Vela, her voice barely above a whisper, said, "You are worthy." Elias stared at them, exhaustion and disbelief mingling in his chest. "Took you long enough." Lithra smirked. "Perhaps, but even warriors need time to learn." That night, for the first time, there was no wall between them. The bond that had been forced by a king began to feel like something real. Hashtag epilogue. Months later, the palace was different. Whispers of scandal had turned to tales of legend. The human consort who had tamed 3 proud princesses not by command, but by resilience. In the great hall, Elias stood with Lithra, Saris, and Vela at his side. They no longer mocked him. They stood beside him as partners. And when King Veriker looked upon them, his booming laughter filled the chamber. Perhaps I was wiser than I knew. Elias only smiled, his hand brushing against the luminous fingers of the sisters who once despised him. Peace had been forged, not by treaty alone, but by something far stronger,